Hi, Dan Goodstein here. I head up the Outsourcing Institute, and I'm joined today by Michael Hoffman. Michael's the VP of Innovation and Growth Strategy at BNY Mellon, and he's also speaking at our upcoming Digital Convergence Conference. Michael, good to be with you today.
Great to be here. Thanks, Dan.
So the first question I want to ask you is probably the biggest for me, at least. It's kind of at the crux of a lot of the conversations I have, which is digital transformation being more about cutting costs, and at least the conversations that I have on a day-to-day basis, versus improving customer experience or helping achieve growth. So, knowing you've led some of these programs around improving customer service, not just cutting costs, how do they normally come about, and what's the trick to getting internal support?
Sure. Yeah, cutting costs is always important, but I think if we talk about digital transformation and uh, cutting cost isn't really the end objective. If it doesn't benefit the customers, I mean, that's really been one of our biggest things is if you're going to make change and you're going to run a program, and the customer doesn't feel any difference, doesn't have any improvement in their experience, doesn't make it better to do business with you, then you've really lost an opportunity there. You should be able to differentiate based on whatever that investment is. I think that also had us really look at the total cost of operation as well. So not just looking at how much we spend to perform a transaction, but look at all the associated costs, inconvenience, timing, et cetera, that our customers experience. And that's really where the biggest lift we've gotten from transformation. We hear that back from our customers all the time.
So many of the executives I speak to, they'll claim that they want to improve customer experience, but they just can't justify the increased cost or determine the ROI. So you've actually achieved some of this revenue growth in these scenarios. How did you get the business case, and how did you ensure ROI?
That's ROI is really where we start, right? So my group is really more set up as a SWAT team within the organization, and with that, once you say innovation, everybody has bright ideas on how to make changes, how to improve things. When I started the bank, we had a list of literally hundreds of different programs. We had like suggestion boxes for innovation things. So when I started to call through that and say, what is really the difference is in terms of what you can achieve, really started to look at that ROI piece and use that as criteria. So we actually set as our criteria this idea of I need to be able to reduce expense at a minimum of 70% or increase revenue at an order of magnitude. Now, those two criteria are so large that it filters a lot of things out right away. But you also don't have that creep backwards that if you don't hit your goal, then you're suddenly unprofitable. So we designed then a method to kind of leverage off of that called aspirational design thinking, which is get everybody involved, customers, internal technology, the business users, and try to scope or design what things could look like in the future if they were optimal. One of the use cases we always have is, how could I do my job from a cell phone or from a smartphone? How could I reduce the number of steps? And that type of design approach has really driven this ROI. And ROI, we're looking at lifetime value per customer. We're looking at the cost to perform each individual transaction, and then the total cost of operation from our side and from the customer side. We measure those before we start. Then we have milestones to make sure that we're achieving that. And then, we on an ongoing basis, we continue to measure that.
No, it's great, great. I mean, I've been a big believer for a long time that digital transformation, could really be an enabler for new revenue centers and help pay for some of the innovation and emerging tech. But Michael, is there a particular technology that you see now that's integral to achieving the ROI for something like this?
Technology to achieve the ROI, I think there's a number of technologies, let's just say that are out there and emerging. From a vendor perspective, there's a lot of technologies that are being pushed that are really looking for a problem to solve. That definitely gets things confusing in terms of the clients that reach out to us in technology or reach directly to the business. Blockchain is going to be a game changer in the future. Not quite there yet, but we need to look at how do we, when we're designing databases, we're designing systems and connectivity, that we're preparing for that type of change later. I think the biggest thing that we've been pushing now for a while is to enhance human performance at every interaction. So by that, I mean that every design that we're looking at for a new system or for a program is looking at it almost as a recommendation engine, so that you're able to make the best decision at any scenario. Look at it from a situation analysis standpoint, that if I'm going to go and perform a transaction, what are the best possible outcomes? And then can I use artificial intelligence? Can I use machine learning? Can I use optical character recognition or computer vision or intelligent character recognition? Gather all this different information together so that I'm making the best decision going forward. And ideally, really the key part, which I think will be a big differentiator for performance, is estimate what my outcome is going to be and then keep measuring my ability to predict. That whole predictive prescriptive piece, I think, is the big thing right now, and will be for the future.
Yep, yep. At BNY Mellon, you led the bank's transformation to technology as a service model, right? So what exactly does that mean, and how has it impacted things like customer experience, partnerships, and the bottom line as a whole?
Yeah, so technology as a service, I think all organizations, especially large organizations like ours, go through patterns of centralization, bring everything into one group, decentralization, let each of the individual lines of business drive their destiny or make the recommendations, and they kind of continue to loop in and out of that. We've, in terms of my group, for what we do for innovation, it's a little bit more of a, like I said, a SWAT team approach, where we get invited into things either when they're really, really good or there's a huge opportunity. Blockchain would be one of those, right? So we get to sit in and say, you know, how can this possibly be used? What problems does that solve? That's great. We also get brought in on other scenarios where a lot of things have been tried, but either we're not competitive enough or the cost and profit scenarios and going in the right direction. How do you radically change that business, or, you know, how can you retool it? That type of thing, that's, again, as a service, we really look at it as a value add. We try to do a very quick kind of scenario analysis within literally a couple of weeks to say, you know, thumbs up or thumbs down, can we contribute? And then we move on. So that's the service from an innovation standpoint that we provide.
So you mentioned disruptive technologies, blockchain. I think of even a few years back, IoT. Both of those are areas where I'm convinced there's opportunity, but also convinced that most executives don't know where it is, right? So, knowing that you've led strategy for both blockchain and IoT projects, where do you glean the value there?
Yes, so, IoT, the Internet of Things, or, really the Internet of everything, right? That everything, inanimate objects, can be programmed or can be tracked, can be monitored. We started on something about four or so years ago, looking at, can an inanimate object be self-aware? Which sounds a little unusual, but if I make a loan on a piece of equipment that costs $10 million, I always use the example, and it's supposed to be in a warehouse or in a factory, working 24 hours a day, and suddenly it's going down the turnpike at 50 miles an hour. As the person that made the loan, I probably want to know that. Similarly, we had done a demonstration using satellite technology, visual technology, and a phone in a construction site. Could I actually use the picture of ongoing construction and the development of this property? Let's say the foundation's been dug. We're up about 2 stories. We have X amount of materials there. Can I take a picture of it, and the picture has enough information and intelligence wrapped around it that it goes and it informs the loan itself to go and do the disbursement of the next piece of cash so the construction can continue? Versus the old school way of driving out to the site, doing the evaluation, and doing a lot of manual inspections. It would really streamline the process, plus keep a digital trail of all those things that have happened. Differently than that, in inanimate objects, we have a lot of paper, tons and tons of paper. We have one warehouse that we estimate has about 1 billion sheets of paper. Well, every time I have to go find a sheet of paper, every time I have to go and record from it, if it moves in and out of the facility, is actually very expensive. So the thought was, well, how can we make the sheets of paper self-aware? So if we can apply RFID tags, radio frequency identification tags, on the sheets of paper, they know where they are then when they're on a shelf. If they start to move within the location, we can actually track that movement if they're in one cell versus another cell, or You can have a rule system in the background that says that piece of paper isn't supposed to go beyond this barrier. An alert goes off, tells somebody. That's what I mean. That kind of innovation also adds substantial value back to all the different stakeholders versus just being a burden to everyone that has to touch it. So I think those are huge opportunities.
No, great examples. And how about from blockchain standpoint? Any advice as to kind of where the rubber meets the road?
Yes, and there's at the bank there's a number of blockchain type projects that we're looking at, and programs that we're looking at, and councils that we're involved in. So we're very much aware of like what's working, what's emerging, and I'll say that most of it is to be determined. The technology is going to be there, but it is definitely game changing, especially for custody and a trust business like where we're in. And when we say blockchain, though, also want to point out that we're talking about permission-based distributed ledger. So the idea that all of the people that have access to the information are all registered, licensed, they all have compliance and regulatory, they've met all those standards, which is a big part of our business right now. And then when you talk about a shared ledger, now I'm talking about reducing the cost of reconciliation, of confirming that a transaction of movement of money or value went from party A to party B to party C. So by taking out a lot of that cost is, another huge benefit. I've also taken out all the latency then of that information. It's because blockchain almost by design is very binary. So once that transaction happens, everybody that needs to know about it is alerted, and it also can't be, I de-risk it a lot. There isn't any reinterpretation of what happened and all those types of things. So it also enables markets to move a lot faster. It increases liquidity substantially. So as it happens, I think that'll really be a very big game changer, and there'll be a number of new products and services that fall out of it.
Yep. I agree. So our last question's around this idea of a chief digital officer. More and more organizations are appointing chief digital officers. I know you did that in a previous role, so I'm curious as to your thoughts on how important this role is for enterprises today, and for those who are looking to bring somebody in, what should their goal be? What should their mandate be within the organization?
Yeah, I smile when you say that, because it just occurred to me that when I meet chief digital officers, and there's a couple of conferences that you still go to, that are all CDO oriented, and my first question is usually, what do you really do? What is the company? How do you define chief digital officer? It used to be people that ran the website, frankly, and then at the other extreme, you had people that were creating whole new businesses that were just purely all web driven. I think it's kind of blended a bit more now, where people are looking at it from a transformation side. How do you take your current footprint and all the things you're doing and add the channel of digital being by smartphone, by putting some intelligence and things in there, all the different layers you can put on top. But the titles definitely changed. I got into a little bit of a controversy a bunch of years ago when I said I had the same question. And I said, well, chief digital officers really shouldn't be paid. They should start with zero base salary. And because a company is giving them the keys to the kingdom, that it's all this digital frontier, they should be paid based on the lift that they're able to provide. How much measurable value do they add to the organization? And with that skin in the game, everybody would be happy. I don't think a lot of CFOs were kind of happy with that answer. Some of the CDOs that got it really got it, and I think it helped them negotiate a little bit more. But organizations definitely need that future-looking kind of individual or group. I think it's tough to hire that from the outside, because it does need to adapt to the company's culture. It's very hard, I think, for companies to digest or to assimilate a shot of just becoming digital tomorrow. You have to either migrate to there or set up another type of organization to go and run it. But again, there's maturity curve. Everything is becoming digital. You definitely need somebody to kind of shepherd that process as it's happening.
Good advice. Michael Hoffman, thanks for being with us, and looking forward to seeing you at the Digital Convergence Conference.
Looking forward to it, Dan. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Michael.
Thanks.